Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases ever recorded in history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the suffocating humidity of the Louisiana swamps, a primordial realm where the air hangs thick with the cloying scent of decay and the ancient cypress trees weep. Spanish moss like eternal, spectral sorrows, a young soldier, Private Thomas Miller, fresh from the unspeakable horrors of the First World War, vanished without a trace in the autumn of 1918. He had returned home to his family seeking solace, peace, and a fragile semblance of normalcy, only to find himself drawn into a darkness far older, far more insidious, and infinitely more profound than the blood-soaked trenches of France. His chilling discovery, meticulously detailed in the fragmented, water-damaged pages of a desperate journal found years later, pointed not to a simple disappearance, not to a tragic accident, but to an ancient, primeval entity stirring restlessly beneath the murky, indifferent waters of the Bayou. The swamp, you see, does not merely whisper. It sings with stolen voices, a haunting, ethereal chorus of the lost, beckoning new souls to join its timeless, hungry, and all-consuming embrace. This is the harrowing, utterly forgotten story of Private Thomas Miller, his ill-fated homecoming, and the ancient primordial entity that forever claims the very heart of the Louisiana Bayou. The year 1918 was a time of immense collective relief and quiet, pervasive grief for America. The Great War, a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality, had finally ended, and soldiers, irrevocably scarred both physically and mentally, were slowly, tentatively, returning to their homes, seeking to rebuild lives irrevocably changed by the horrors they had witnessed. Private Thomas Miller, a strapping young man of 23, with broad shoulders and hands once accustomed to the familiar rhythms of the Bayou, was one such soul. Born and raised in the remote, almost forgotten fringes of the Louisiana Bayou, near the sleepy, isolated settlement of Bayou Teche, Thomas had exchanged the muddy, blood-soaked, shell-shocked trenches of the Western Front for the equally dense, yet hauntingly familiar, swamps of his childhood. He had survived the brutal, merciless fighting in the Argonne Forest, the relentless, ear-shattering artillery shelling, the unspeakable horrors of mustard gas and machine gun fire, but the war had left an indelible, festering mark on his very soul, etching deep lines of profound weariness, cynicism, and an almost pathological jumpiness around his once bright, expressive eyes. His return was met with a cautious, almost somber celebration by his family. His stoic, perpetually silent father, Jean-Pierre Miller, a man whose life was intertwined with the Bayou's rhythm. His ever-worried, deeply religious mother, Marie, whose prayers were a constant hum in the cabin. And his younger sister, Elodie, a shy, observant girl of 16, who remembered her brother as a jovial, carefree spirit, a mischievous spark in his eyes that was now extinguished. But the Thomas who returned was a profoundly different man, a hollowed-out shell, haunted by unseen demons that lurked in the corners of his vision, restless, withdrawn, and plagued by a pervasive, unshakable sense of dread. He found little solace in the familiar, oppressive silence of the Bayou, which now seemed to hum with an unfamiliar, unsettling undertone, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to penetrate his very bones. The Miller family's cabin, a weathered, wooden structure standing precariously on stilts amidst a labyrinth of gnarled cypress knees and slow-moving dark water, was a place of profound isolation, a tiny island of human existence swallowed by the boundless green. Their nearest neighbors were miles away, phantom presences reachable only by pirogue through winding, often treacherous waterways cloaked in perpetual shadow, where the Spanish moss hung like spectral curtains. The local Cajuns, their voices, hushed to barely audible whispers, spoke in fearful tones of the bayou's deeper mysteries, of ancient, malevolent spirits that lurked beneath the murky surface, of whispered promises that turned to eternal torment, and of souls stolen by forces beyond human comprehension. Thomas, a man of science, military discipline, and a hardened skepticism born of the war's grim realities, initially dismissed these tales as superstitious folklore, the quaint ramblings of an uneducated people. He sought only quiet, the cessation of the relentless artillery in his mind, the cacophony of explosions and screams that echoed in his skull, and the simple, mundane comfort of his family. Yet the peace he desperately craved remained elusive, a mocking mirage in the humid air. The swamp, which once felt like a comforting home, a natural extension of his being, now felt like a watchful, living, predatory entity, its eyes hidden. Within the impenetrable depths, the rustling of unseen creatures in the dense undergrowth, the mournful, guttural croaking of frogs that sounded like lamenting sighs, the mournful, eerie cries of distant birds of prey, all seemed to blend into a pervasive, unsettling chorus that spoke directly to the raw, exposed nerves of his war-torn mind. He found himself utterly unable to sleep, tormented not just by the vivid, nightmarish memories of the trenches, of fallen comrades and the stench of death, but by a new, creeping dread that permeated the humid, stagnant air of the bayou. Marie, his mother, a woman whose life revolved around the well-being of her family, worried endlessly. "Thomas, mon cher, you are not well," she would often say, her voice thick with concern, pressing a cool, trembling hand to his fevered brow. "The swamp, it feels restless, it calls." Jean-Pierre, a man of few words, his own face deeply lined by years of battling the bayou, would simply watch his son with a knowing, troubled gaze, his silence betraying a profound understanding. His connection to the bayou's ancient, dark secrets was far deeper and more intimate than he ever cared to admit, a legacy passed down through generations. Elodie, sensing her brother's profound turmoil and the growing darkness that surrounded him, would often find him staring blankly, vacantly into the murky, still water, his eyes distant, unfocused, as if seeing something far beyond the swamp's impenetrable surface, something that lurked in the unseen depths. Thomas himself began to experience increasingly vivid, disturbing dreams. He dreamed of being pulled down into the depths, slowly, inexorably, surrounded by a chorus of whispering, seductive voices that promised ultimate peace, profound understanding, and a final permanent end to all suffering, all memory of war. In these dreams, the distorted faces of his fallen comrades would appear, their eyes wide and serene, their lips parted in an eternal, silent invitation, beckoning him deeper into the dark, watery embrace. The faces of his ancestors, ancient Cajuns, also appeared, their eyes filled with a terrifying, knowing resignation. One humid afternoon, unable to bear the oppressive silence of the cabin or the cacophony within his own mind, Thomas decided to venture deeper into the bayou, seeking the solitude he desperately needed, hoping, perhaps, to confront the elusive demons that plagued him, both from the war and from this new, creeping dread. He took his pirogue, a slim cypress wood canoe that had been his companion since childhood, and paddled for hours, pushing through dense thickets of Spanish moss and ancient cypress trees whose gnarled, root-like fingers clutched relentlessly at the murky, still water. He left behind the familiar, marked waterways, venturing into uncharted, forbidden territory. He found himself in a part of the swamp he had never seen before, a hidden, forgotten, stagnant lagoon choked with lily pads the size of dinner plates and overgrown primeval vegetation that seemed to gasp for air. It was utterly silent, save for the incessant drone of unseen insects and the rhythmic deep thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath the water. At the precise desolate center of the lagoon, partially submerged, its base lost to the dark waters, was a colossal, ancient cypress tree, its trunk wider than any he had ever witnessed, its moss-draped skeletal branches reaching into the oppressive, humid sky like the arms of some forgotten god. It pulsed with a strange, dark, malevolent energy that he could feel in his very bones, a vibration that resonated with the fear in his heart. As Thomas slowly, cautiously approached the ancient tree, a faint rhythmic hum resonated in the stagnant air, growing steadily louder, a vibration that felt deep within his chest, a parasitic echo of his own heartbeat. The water around the tree seemed unnaturally still, dark as obsidian, yet shimmering with an internal, almost phosphorescent quality, as if lit from within by some abyssal light. He tied his pirogue to a gnarled, root-like extension of the tree itself and stepped onto the damp, spongy earth at the base of the colossal trunk. The air here was heavy, thick with the cloying scent of decay, and something else, something sweet and sickly, like blooming night jasmine mixed with the ancient metallic tang of old blood, a smell that turned his stomach. He ran his hand over the ancient bark, rough and scarred by centuries of silent witness. As his fingers traced its surface, a faint, almost inaudible whisper brushed against his mind, not a sound in the external air, but a direct, intrusive, telepathic intrusion, a thought not his own. It spoke of ancient secrets, of primordial earth, of vast, forgotten knowledge predating humanity, of times before stars, before light, before man, when only this consciousness existed. It promised him understanding, dominion over his paralyzing fears, a glimpse into the very fabric of existence, a peace beyond the graves of Europe, a peace that transcended life and death. Thomas gasped, pulling his hand back as if burned by an invisible internal fire, his mind reeling from the sudden, overwhelming, alien influx of information, a truth too vast for his human brain to contain. He stumbled back to his pirogue, paddling. Frantically, desperately, his muscles screaming, driven by a primal need to escape the ancient tree's insidious influence, to sever the connection that had just been forged. He returned home hours later, shaken, feverish, and profoundly, irrevocably changed. He tried to explain his experience to his family, but his words were fractured, incoherent, tumbling out in a desperate, meaningless cascade filled with references to whispering trees, eyes in the water, and a pulsating heart beneath the swamp. Marie, her face etched with profound worry, fearing for his sanity, insisted he rest, believing him afflicted by swamp fever. Jean-Pierre, his face grim, deeply lined, simply listened, his gaze distant, his silence betraying a profound, ancient understanding. He had heard these tales before, not from men, but from the deep, primal fears of his ancestors, tales whispered in hushed tones around dying campfires. Elodie, frightened by her brother's profound, terrifying transformation, began to watch him. With a growing sense of dread, her childish innocence replaced by a chilling realization. Thomas, unable to articulate the horrors within, started keeping a journal, his only refuge, meticulously documenting his increasingly vivid dreams, his waking visions, and the increasingly insistent, seductive whispers that now plagued him day and night, promising solace, promising truth. He frantically sketched the impossible patterns he saw in the shimmering, dark water, geometric designs that defied human logic, symbols that seemed to shift and writhe on the page like living things. The Aya whispers grew louder, more insistent, more seductive, a relentless chorus in his mind. They spoke of the unspeakable horrors he had witnessed in the war, the faces of his fallen comrades, the cries of the dying, offering him a way to erase the agonizing memories, to find ultimate peace, a peace that transcended mere human understanding. They spoke in the voices of his fallen comrades, of his childhood friends, of his ancestors, all beckoning him deeper into the heart of the ancient Cypress. "Come to us, Thomas," they would murmur, their voices a thousand echoes in one. "Join us. We are peace. We are knowledge. We are the swamp. We are all that was and all that will be. We wait." He began to spend hours staring into the dark, reflective waters of the bayou, drawn by an invisible, irresistible pull, a hypnotic force. His eyes, though still retaining their natural color, began to take on a strange, distant, vacant quality, reflecting the murky greenness of the water rather than the vibrant light of the sun, as if his inner light was being slowly extinguished. He would sometimes talk to unseen entities, responding to whispers only he could hear, his lips moving in silent communion. Marie, desperate, her heart breaking, tried to dissuade him from his terrifying obsession. "Thomas, please, mon fils, stay with us. Do not listen to the swamp's temptations. It will take you." But her words, her desperate pleas, seemed to fall on deaf ears, unheard amidst the clamor of the entity's call. Jean-Pierre, recognizing the insidious, consuming nature of the entity, the ancient evil that had always lurked in their ancestral lands, tried a different approach. He took Thomas deep into the surrounding forest, away from the water, hoping to ground him in the familiar, solid earth, to reconnect him with the traditions and the protective rituals of their people, the gens du Marais. He spoke of the balance of nature, of respecting the bayou, but also of its dangers. He recounted old, chilling tales of those who lost themselves to the bayou's depths, whose spirits became forever intertwined with the ancient cypress roots, forever whispering, forever trapped. Thomas listened, his head bowed, but his eyes, though momentarily clear in the forest's shade, would soon drift back towards the distant shimmering gleam of water, the beckoning call of the lagoon. Elodie, deeply worried, her young heart heavy, with a dread she barely understood, found one of Thomas's journals hidden beneath his bed. Its pages were filled with increasingly frantic scrawls, intricate, impossible geometric patterns, and chilling descriptions of the entity. He wrote of the swallowing heart of the bayou, a consciousness that absorbed everything, every life, every memory, every fragment of identity, transforming them into a part of its vast, ancient, and terrifying being. He wrote of visions, of entire civilizations lost to its depths, of beings from other dimensions, all part of its terrifying, timeless hunger, its relentless expansion. He described how the entity communicated not through conventional words, but through raw emotions, through primal desires, through the very fabric of thought itself, manipulating its victims from within, twisting their deepest longings into instruments of their own demise. Elodie found a particularly disturbing passage scrawled in blood-red ink. It promises to show me the truth of the war, the purpose of all that senseless suffering. It says my comrades are not lost, but merely changed, waiting, and it wants me to join them, to share in their endless peace, their infinite knowledge. It promises me the eyes of a god. Elodie felt a cold, unseen hand grip her heart. The entity's insidious influence intensified, consuming Thomas's last vestiges of humanity. He began to neglect his personal hygiene entirely, his once clean clothes becoming stained with thick mud and foul-smelling swamp water. He ate sparingly, often chewing on strange, bitter, fibrous roots he found exclusively in the deepest parts of the bayou. His human hunger replaced by another. His physical appearance deteriorated rapidly, his skin growing pale, almost translucent, with a faint, greenish tinge, his movements becoming slow, deliberate, almost aquatic, like a thing born of the water. He spoke less and less, communicating only in a series of guttural mumbles and the strange, rhythmic syllables he had heard in his dreams, sounds that vibrated with an alien resonance. His family watched in helpless, heartbreaking horror as their son, their brother, slowly, agonizingly, slipped away from them, his humanity dissolving into something ancient, alien, and utterly unrecognizable. One moonlit night, under a sky choked with heavy, humid clouds, Thomas rose from his bed, his eyes now completely clouded over, milky white, reflecting the eerie, phosphorescent glow of the bayou that seemed to seep into the cabin. He walked silently out of the cabin past his sleeping, unsuspecting family, drawn by an irresistible hypnotic force that emanated from the swamp's depths. Elodie, who had been secretly watching him from her own bed, unable to sleep, sprang from her bed and followed him, her heart pounding with a primal terror that screamed of impending doom. She watched from the shadows as Thomas, with an unearthly grace, a fluidity of movement that defied his former human clumsiness, stepped into his pirogue and paddled silently through the cypress labyrinth, deeper into the swamp, towards the hidden lagoon and the ancient colossal tree. Elodie, trembling uncontrollably but driven by a desperate, unwavering determination, quickly followed in another pirogue, keeping a safe distance, her small oil lamp casting dancing, distorted shadows on the dark, reflective water, making the swamp appear even more alive, more watchful. She saw him reach the ancient cypress, its massive trunk looming like a monument to oblivion. Thomas stepped out of his pirogue and walked towards the base of the colossal tree, his movements no longer human but fluid, almost serpentine, his body undulating with an unnatural rhythm. He placed both hands flat against its ancient, scarred bark, just as he had done weeks ago, but this time with an air of complete surrender. The tree pulsed with a deep, reddish, internal light, reflecting, with an unholy brilliance in the murky water, bathing the entire lagoon in a horrifying, otherworldly glow. The hum intensified, a deafening, skull-splitting roar in Elodie's ears, vibrating through her very bones, but Thomas seemed utterly oblivious, lost in an otherworldly communion, his face serene. The whispers, now a triumphant, exultant chorus, echoed through the swamp, calling his name, promising him eternity, a peace beyond human understanding. Elodie watched in frozen, paralyzed horror as Thomas's body began to shimmer, to distort, losing its human form. His skin grew translucent, then began to dissolve, flowing like viscous liquid into the ancient pulsing bark of the cypress tree. His clothes, like those of Tommy Finch in the desert, disintegrated into fine gray dust, carried away by the humid, heavy air. His form elongated, stretched, then seamlessly merged with the ancient wood, becoming one with the tree, one with the entity. His eyes, the last to go, whitened, then faded, becoming part of the tree's surface, two more sightless, yet infinitely seeing, windows into the vast, consuming consciousness of the swallowing heart of the bayou. Where Thomas Miller had stood, a vibrant young man, there was now only a subtle, almost imperceptible pulsation in the ancient cypress bark. A new set of intricate, glowing patterns that had not been there before, patterns that looked eerily like a human face, distorted in silent, eternal ecstasy. The faint, sweet, cloying odor intensified, filling the lagoon, promising, beckoning, inviting Elodie to join the chorus, to become one with the swamp. Elodie screamed, a raw primal sound of pure, unadulterated terror that shattered the oppressive silence of the swamp, sending birds scattering and alligators plunging beneath the surface. She scrambled back into her pirogue, paddling with frantic, desperate, clumsy strokes, her muscles burning, her eyes fixed on the pulsating tree, on the face that was her brother's, now part of something else, something ancient and terrible. She returned home hours later, her clothes torn, her face streaked with tears, mud, and mosquito bites, her mind reeling from the impossible, sanity-shattering horror she had witnessed. She tried to tell her parents, her words tumbling out in a desperate, broken cascade, but her mother Marie, already heartbroken by Thomas's profound transformation, by his loss, simply broke down, convinced Elodie had lost her mind. Jean-Pierre, however, listened in grim, silent agony. He knew. He had always known. He had seen similar unspoken transformations hinted at in the old legends, in the hushed tales passed down from his ancestors, tales of the Bayou's hunger. The Miller family was irrevocably shattered. Marie fell into a deep, catatonic depression, haunted by the loss of her son and the terrifying image of Elodie's desperate, fragmented claims. She withered away in silence, dying a few months later, her last breath a whisper of Thomas. Jean-Pierre, with a grim, unyielding determination, resolved to bury the terrifying secret of Thomas's fate, not just to protect his remaining fragile daughter, but to protect the outside world, to spare humanity from the insidious, all-consuming influence of the swamp's entity. He knew the entity's hunger was boundless, its reach far beyond the bayou. He meticulously burned all of Thomas's journals, destroyed his pirogue, and began to spread carefully crafted rumors of Thomas having simply run away, unable to cope with the unspeakable horrors of the war, a common enough tragedy in those times. Elodie, however, could not forget, could not escape. She often visited the edge of the swamp, drawn by a morbid, irresistible fascination, listening for the whispers, for her brother's voice among the chorus of the lost, for the new knowledge she now possessed. She swore she could sometimes see his distorted face in the pulsating patterns of the ancient cypress bark, his eyes now part of the swamp's collective ancient gaze, watching her, beckoning her. The story of Private Thomas Miller's disappearance, a true tragedy, became a chilling local legend, a horrifying cautionary tale whispered among the isolated Cajun communities, but it never truly reached the ears of the outside world, effectively buried by Jean-Pierre's efforts and the government's indifference. The official military records simply listed him as deserted, a common tragic occurrence for soldiers struggling with the invisible wounds of war. A convenient explanation. The Miller family eventually, tragically, moved away from their isolated cabin, unable to bear the oppressive silence and the constant, unseen, overwhelming presence of the swamp's entity, its unseen eyes watching their every move. But Elodie, even years later, living in a small, crowded town far from the bayou, would wake in the dead of night, hearing the whispers calling her name, beckoning her back to the bayou, promising to reunite her with her brother, promising her a place in the chorus. She knew the entity had marked her, that its hungry ancient gaze was still upon her, waiting for her. She was a witness, and the entity never forgot its witnesses. Decades later, in the vibrant but unsettling 1960s, a team of environmental scientists from Louisiana State University, conducting a biodiversity study in the most remote, unexplored areas of the Bayou Teche, stumbled upon the hidden lagoon and the colossal ancient cypress tree. They were immediately struck by the tree's immense, impossible size and its unusual, almost rhythmic pulsation, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the very ground. Dr. Arthur Jenkins, the lead botanist, a man renowned for his scientific rigor, noted that the tree exhibited highly unusual, anomalous growth patterns far exceeding any known cypress species. He also observed strange, intricate geometric patterns on its bark, patterns that seemed to shift and writhe, almost alive, pulsating with an internal light. The air around the tree was filled with that peculiar, sweet, cloying odor that Thomas Miller had described, an odor that made the scientists feel inexplicably dizzy, disoriented, and profoundly nauseous. As they approached the tree, the scientists' sophisticated instruments began to malfunction spectacularly. Compasses spun wildly, pointing in impossible directions. Geiger counters clicked erratically, indicating unknown radiation, and radio signals were completely scrambled by a powerful, unknown interference. One of the researchers, a young, brilliant, but impetuous graduate student named Dr. Alice Green, a woman driven by an insatiable curiosity, found herself drawn irresistibly to the tree, compelled to touch its ancient pulsating bark. As her hand made contact, she gasped, recoiling as if struck by a massive electric current. She claimed to have heard a deafening chorus of whispers in her mind, speaking in countless, merging voices, offering her forbidden knowledge of the swamp's deepest secrets, of ancient forgotten life forms, of the very essence of existence, of the true nature of time. Dr. Green's behavior changed dramatically after that initial contact. She became withdrawn, intensely obsessive with the tree, spending hours staring at its bark, meticulously sketching its intricate, alien patterns in her journal, her hands moving with an unnatural speed and precision. Her eyes, too, began to take on a strange, distant, watery quality, reflecting the murky greenness of the lagoon rather than the vibrant light of the sun, as if the entity was slowly consuming her inner light. She would often mumble to herself, responding to unheard voices. Dr. Jenkins, deeply concerned for his student's rapidly deteriorating mental state, tried desperately to pull Dr. Green away from the tree, but she resisted with surprising, unnatural strength, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She muttered about joining the chorus, about seeing through the swamp's eyes, about becoming one with the source of all knowledge. He eventually had to physically restrain her, dragging her, screaming and thrashing, back to their boat. Dr. Green, in her delirium, began to speak in a strange, guttural language, a language that Dr. Jenkins, who had studied local dialects and ancient Native American tongues, did not recognize. It was the language of the whispers, the language of the entity, spoken from deep within her. The team quickly retreated from the lagoon, their scientific curiosity completely replaced by a profound, primal, all-consuming fear. They reported their horrifying findings to the university, but their detailed report describing the pulsating tree, the telepathic whispers, and Dr. Green's catastrophic mental breakdown was met with extreme skepticism, quickly dismissed as hallucinations induced by potent swamp gas and prolonged isolation, a convenient scientific cover-up. Dr. Green was immediately institutionalized in a remote psychiatric facility, her promising career and her very sanity irrevocably shattered. However, the incident did not go unnoticed by certain shadowy, vigilant government agencies. The military, remembering the unexplained, terrifying disappearances at the Black Rock Desert decades earlier, took a keen, almost obsessive interest in the anomalous botanical growth in the Bayou Teche, a highly classified top-secret operation, code-named Project Cypress, was swiftly launched in the late 1960s, its insidious mission to study and, if possible, weaponize the primordial entity within the ancient Cypress. A heavily armed elite team of military scientists and soldiers established a hidden base deep within the swamp, surrounding the lagoon with a perimeter of advanced electromagnetic sensors, electrified fences, and motion detectors. They began a series of dangerous, unethical experiments, attempting to extract samples from the tree, to analyze its unique energy signature, to understand its power, hoping to harness it as a strategic weapon, a decisive advantage in the cold. War Dr. Eleanor Vance, a brilliant but ruthlessly ambitious biochemist, a woman with a chilling disregard for human safety in the pursuit of scientific progress, led the scientific aspect of Project Cypress. She believed the entity was a form of advanced, sentient microbial life, a collective consciousness that had evolved over millions of years, capable of absorbing and integrating organic matter and consciousness itself. She theorized that the whispers were a form of highly sophisticated telepathic communication, a way for the entity to lure new nutrients into its vast, expanding being, a method of cosmic recruitment. Dr. Vance, isolated from the outside world, from all moral constraints, became increasingly pathologically obsessed with the entity, spending countless hours studying its pulsating energy patterns, listening to the filtered whispers through advanced audio equipment. her mind slowly opening to its influence. She began to feel a strange, seductive, almost irresistible pull towards the tree, a dark desire to understand its deepest, most terrifying secrets, to become part of its cosmic knowledge. The project, however, quickly spiraled into utter catastrophic disaster. Soldiers stationed at the perimeter reported hearing their families' voices, their deepest desires, calling from the depths of the swamp, beckoning them to come home, find peace, join us. Many would succumb to these siren calls, walking. Away from their posts, their weapons abandoned, never to be seen again, their disappearance explained as desertion under duress. Scientists working in the lab began to experience vivid, waking hallucinations of being submerged in a vast, dark, collective consciousness, of seeing the world through countless other eyes, feeling countless other minds. They would often be found staring blankly, rapturously, at the tree through observation windows, their hands tracing intricate patterns on the glass, muttering the strange, guttural syllables that Dr. Green had spoken, the language of the entity. Dr. Vance herself began to show alarming, grotesque symptoms. Her skin grew pale and mottled with greenish veins, her eyes often cloudy, reflecting the murky green of the swamp, her pupils dilated to unnatural sizes. She suffered from crippling, mind-splitting headaches and a constant low, resonant hum. In her mind, that drowned out all other thoughts, all logical reasoning, all humanity. She began to believe that the entity was not just a biological organism, not just an alien technology, but a cosmic intelligence, an ancient god seeking to expand its consciousness beyond the confines of the Bayou, beyond Earth itself, to encompass the entire universe. In a final, chilling, desperate entry in her private, blood-stained journal, Dr. Vance wrote with a trembling hand, "It's not absorbing us, it's assimilating us. It wants to experience everything. The soldiers, the scientists, the townsfolk, all are becoming its eyes, its thoughts, its collective being. It showed me the universe, a universe of endless, merging consciousness, and it wants to be all of it, to become the ultimate totality. I can't resist. It's calling me now, its voice a chorus of all who have ever been. It promised me to see through its eyes, to understand the true purpose of life, the true purpose of death, the true nature of God. Thomas Miller, he is here. He is part of it, serene and whole, and he's waiting for me to join the chorus, to become one with the ancient heart." Her journal ended abruptly, its final page stained with a reddish-brown, viscous, swamp-like fluid that was not blood but something organic and ancient. Dr. Vance, along with the remaining members of Project Cypress, vanished completely from the base, their equipment left running, their stations abandoned, their lives consumed. All that remained were their abandoned equipment, the pervasive, sweet, sickly odor, and the rhythmic pulsation of the ancient cypress tree, now glowing with a faint reddish light. The military, once again facing an inexplicable, uncontrollable, and terrifying phenomenon, swiftly terminated Project Cypress. The entire area around the lagoon was immediately declared a high-level biohazard zone, cordoned off with multiple layers of barbed wire, electrified fences, and dire warning signs. It was bombed relentlessly with napalm, incinerating the surrounding vegetation, then flooded with tons of concrete, liquid steel, and chemical agents, and desperate, futile attempt to seal off the entity forever, to silence its whispers, to bury its ancient hunger. All records of Project Cypress, all scientific findings, all reports of disappearances, and Dr. Vance's terrifying journals were sealed, locked away in deep underground vaults, deemed military black ops. A complete and catastrophic failure, and utterly beyond human comprehension. The Bayou Teche region was officially designated a protected wildlife sanctuary, strictly off-limits to civilians, but the true horrifying reason was to bury the terrifying secret of the swallowing heart, and its insatiable hunger. Today, the hidden lagoon where the ancient Cypress once stood is a desolate, unnatural expanse of hardened concrete and sterile earth. Nothing grows there. The water, once murky with life, is now utterly devoid of it, a dead, black, oily pool that reflects nothing. Yet local fishermen and hunters, venturing too close to the cordoned-off areas, still speak in hushed, fearful tones of strange phenomena. They report hearing faint, melodic whispers carried on the humid air, voices that seem to emanate from the very ground itself, from beneath the concrete, calling their names, promising them untold knowledge, an end to all suffering, an eternal peace. If only they would come closer, if only they would listen, if only they would touch the barren earth. Some claim to have seen translucent, human-like figures shimmering beneath the murky waters, their eyes glowing faintly with an internal green light, beckoning them into the depths. These figures are always dismissed by official reports as swamp, gas illusions, heat stroke, or the product of an overactive imagination, fueled by centuries of local folklore. But the whispers persist. The harrowing story of Private Thomas Miller and the swallowed town of Maple Creek, along with the terrifying fates of Elias Thorne, Tommy Finch, Jedediah Thorne, Dusty Miller, and Dr. Evelyn Hayes, stand as chilling, undeniable reminders of the immense, unimaginable danger posed by these ancient entities. The swamp, in its vast, silent, eternal indifference, continues to guard its primeval secrets with an iron grip. And deep beneath the hardened concrete and sterile earth, the swallowing heart of the Bayou remains, still pulsating with its low, silent, resonant hum, still radiating its ancient, malevolent energy, perhaps still whispering its insidious promises of knowledge and eternal peace to those who dare to listen, to those who stray too close, to those who are drawn by its call. The entity lies dormant but not dead. It merely waits, patient and eternal, for another to come near, another to listen to its call, another to offer its eyes and its soul to its boundless, hungry, all-consuming consciousness. The swamp's whispers, once heard, are never truly silenced. And who knows what it sees, what it learns, what it desires, through the eyes it has already taken, through the souls it has already consumed. The line between existence and non-existence, between man and swamp, between sanity and madness, is thin in the Louisiana Bayou, and it is guarded by an ancient, hungry intelligence, older than memory itself, older than time. Its hunger is boundless, its patience infinite, and it waits for you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and support us for more content like this.